And my name's Charles Morris. In fact, I was at the very first conference. It was a founder of Michigan Interfaith Power and Light. But very excited today that we're sharing this session on something that's really key to sustainability recycling, and in session 1D. And just a reminder that turn off your cell phones or during the session, respect for the speaker or other attendees. There will be a question and comment period following the presentation. So that's the preference would be if you could just hold your questions until the end, and Karen will be happy to take them. And again, they say product names may not be used by speakers nor questions from the audience. So just a little disclaimer. And then say if you put your name and email, there's a form, you get CEU credits if you're an architect or if USGBC, and there's also, if you're a student, you can print your name here. And then we'll take there's an evaluation form, you can just turn that in at the end of the session. And I'm just very proud then to announce, and I'll be the timekeeper there, so you're a little docent. My name, yeah, just sign in here, guys. And Karen O'Brien is we're privileged the executive director of the Michigan Recycling Coalition. And she's been working in a variety of capacities since 1993. And she, in addition to managing the organization, her interests lie in it's building consensus and movement about around public policy. So as an advocate as well. She's a nonprofit development specialist and facilitator. She leads many nonprofit organizations through strategic planning efforts, and she was social science bachelor from MSU and has completed ICL's executive director development program. And so without further ado, I present you Karen O'Brien.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me here today. I am obliged to let you know that what I hope to do here today is to bring you up to speed on what's happening in recycling around the nation, and especially in Michigan. And we really see recycling as an economic activity, and it extends the life of all the natural resources that we're extracting and circulating in our economy. And in doing so, the recycling extends the life of these natural resources, which is better for all of us. So I endeavor to bring you up to speed on everything that's kind of policy, economy, and environment about the value of recycling. So the Michigan Recycling Coalition has been around for more than 30 years. It's a professional association. We serve recycling professionals in one capacity or another. Those are municipal operations, those are private operations that provide recycling services, but they're also businesses that recycle in their own businesses. The chair of our organization is Bill Gurn, who works for Hayworth. Hayworth is a furniture company. He established a recycling facility for Hayworth, and not only saved them much in landfill costs, but created $1 million in revenue for them every year in the sale of the commodities that they produce. So we serve a whole bunch of people that are trying to move the recycling initiative forward. Hi, come on in.
Hello, thank you.
When I first got into this job many years ago, it was all about a disposal crisis. It was about a garbage barge traveling down a river looking for a place to dump this stuff. It was about, in Michigan particularly, it was about dwindling landfill space. It was about us importing waste, which we're still doing from other states and from Canada. That's where we were focused. And those are still issues for us today, but the recycling has really matured over the years, and it really is now about a sustainable materials economy. We spend all of this resources and time and effort to extract these natural resources out of the ground, only to put them back in the ground when we're done. And we're really not getting the full value of those materials out. Companies are starting to see this, and they are starting to see that there's a greater demand for natural resources than is the capacity for natural resources. So they're starting to see that recycling has a tremendous value in lowering their operational costs and their transportation costs, and really the supply costs of the resources that they build their products upon. So we need to be competitive. We need to be able to harness the resources that are already circulating in our economy so that we can attract manufacturers who can do things with those. Come on in. And in doing so, you know, it's got tremendous value, environmental value and economic value. So traditionally, you know, this is the way we get our natural resources. It's very intensive, it's land intensive, it produces toxic waste, and it leaves an ugly scar on the earth. The yield in doing it this way is really, 12 pounds a ton for copper. This is a mine actually in, I believe, North Carolina. But this is the new way that we're starting to mine resources. It has a much, much higher yield. It can happen anywhere, and it's much cleaner. We can control the effluent of this. So we're beginning to shift. We need to shift from doing it one way to doing it another way. We're still going to have to do that to some extent, but probably much less if we can change the paradigm. So, recycling is a job creator, very easy. If for 10,000 tons per year of material, if that material is landfilled or incinerated, it creates 1 job. If we compost material, 4 jobs. If we recycle, 10 jobs. If we do other value-added activity to the materials that we've recycled, we're talking upwards of 100 to 300 jobs. So in reworking, using the materials that are already circulating in our economy and getting the most value out of those materials, we put people to work. And the EPA has said that the extraction of natural resources, the production, the transport, and the disposal of foods and goods contributes to 42% of the greenhouse gas emissions that we're challenged by. So recycling is having a tremendous impact on the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So environmentally it's good, economically it's good. So just to bring you up to speed about kind of the world of recycling right now, I just want to give you some terms. Have you ever heard of a MRF? A MRF is a material recovery facility. Parts of it look like that, and it's really the place where your recyclables go to get sorted out, to be turned into kind of commodities. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. Single stream recycling is something that's really been gaining attention in the past few years, and really it refers to a collection method. So instead of a recycling truck pulling up your house and taking your bin and separating into, your material into different compartments of the truck, the glass, the plastic, the paper, the whatever, all of that stuff goes into one compartment of the truck. They don't have to stay there sorting the material. They just put it in the truck, go to the next house, put it in the truck, and that gets taken to a MRF where all of that stuff is sorted out. The good thing about single stream recycling is that it allows us to really expand almost infinitely the amount and types of material we can pick up from the curb to recycle. So at one time we were not able to pick up kids' plastic toys. And now we can do that because we don't have to separate and find new separate compartments in the truck to put that material. We can take bulky items, 5-gallon buckets and scrap metal and all kinds of stuff. So we're getting better at this. It creates challenges on the other end because sorting all that stuff out is really a technological feat, but it allows us to more effectively get the material out of your home in a convenient way and get it to a place that it will be processed. And with the advent of single stream, we can increase recycling 30%. So the number of materials we can ask you to recycle increases because now we can expand the number of materials. So we now need to provide bigger carts. So these curbside recycling carts with wheels and handles and lids are kind of the latest technology. Very simple, but it keeps the recyclables clean. It allows us to put many more recyclables in there. You're creating much less waste if we're providing you with bigger bins. This again contributes to even more recovery of materials because we're making it easier for you to do that. And the best way to deliver these services is really through public and private partnerships. Oh, there's a slide that's missing. Nope, okay. So this is what a material recovery facility looks like. It really is, mechanical machine intensive. There's a lot of technology involved in separating plastics from glass, from papers. And it's labor intensive as well. You've got people who are separating that material into little slots there, taking out contaminants and putting in certain places, or working certain lines, and the paper line, and making sure that there's no plastic that comes in the paper line, so they remove that from the line. And then that material is kind of collected in some big cages, and then once you get a good clean stream of material, it's loaded into a baler. And this is what good, clean commodities look like. It's not garbage anymore. Our companies are paying good money for this. And this will go to a secondary processor who will chip or flake the plastic, who will wash and clean it, who will pelletize it and make it available for manufacturing in the next stage. So right here in Southfield, there's a material recovery facility called ROSOC, the Resource Recovery and Recycling Authority of Southeast Oakland County. It's a public-private partnership. 7 communities have come together to create this authority. They own a building, and then they work with Community Recycling, and they operate the facility. And they've even invested in upgrading the facility to become single stream, have that capacity. So the authority helps to manage and oversee the operations, and the authority serves its 7 communities, but the facility, the MRF, collects material from much more than those 7 communities. City of Lansing right now is trucking all of their recyclables to this facility right now. Detroit is trucking all of their material to this facility. It's got like a 25 ton per hour capacity, and a recycling truck can hold anywhere from 2 to 6 tons of material. So it's a very high functioning, centralized, processing system that we need to feed so it can operate efficiency, so we can benefit from, so our communities can benefit from these efficiencies. And then from there, Community bales the material, and the material literally goes all over the world. If we're lucky, it stays close to Michigan. But in the case of many plastic, it's going to China. Many of our recyclables go to China. There's a big need and demand for that material. And there's more to that story if you have questions about it. Do questions as you go? Or he asked, we should wait to the end, but please take note of your question. So just to give you, the picture in the state of Michigan, because that's really kind of my perspective. Unfortunately, unfortunately, we don't collect data about how much we recycle here in Michigan. Our state is not taking any kind of leadership role in what we could be doing to be better recyclers here in this state. Educated guesses have us recycling only 14.5% of our waste stream, and that includes the bottle bill and the yard waste ban. So we're recycling really much less than that. That's bad. Our Great Lakes neighbors average 30%. The country averages 34%. There's some below us, but there's some who are far, far above us too in what they're able to recycle. So the governor has a dashboard, and on his dashboard of progress in Michigan, he's identified 21 counties really providing, community access to recycling. And so community access is, if you have a community of less than 10,000, then you have to provide some reasonable drop-off opportunities. If you have a community over 10,000, well, you have to provide curbside. And so, if we have about 1,600 communities under 10,000, so mostly north of the Knuckles, we're really having a hard time servicing people who live in less densely populated areas, and they are not getting the services they need. Many communities are at this, 185 communities above 10,000. They are getting curbside, but there are many populations within those communities that aren't serviced. So for example, multifamily and commercial entities are not being serviced by those programs. So there's a lot we're not doing, and it shows in that recycling rate. And one, I think the biggest problems for us is that recycling happens different everywhere. Recycling was an organic process. There was nobody who took the lead and really, provided the guiding light as to how we should develop our systems and programs. And so every community is doing something different. We can't take our recycling knowledge really with us across any kind of borders because it doesn't always equate. And that's challenging for recycling. So back in 2011, my organization, who, if there's going to be an expert that stands up to provide the shining light vision, let's be it. And so we developed a report that really sought to identify the value of recycling to Michigan's economy and environment. What elements do we need in a program to really move us forward? So we identified those. We identified what the costs are of providing those services or those programs that get us to our goals. And then we identified potential funding mechanisms. And one of the most important things we had to do is to help the state understand why its role is so important. And its role is so important in this particular field, and probably in solar and wind and some of the other topics we've already heard about, is important because if you look economically, landfilling has external costs that we all pay. And recycling has external benefits that we can all benefit from. But they're not always easy to see, they're not always immediate, and they transfer across borders very easily. So public policy says, recycling program costs are local while the benefits are widespread. And so policy speaking, we need to provide, the foundation for the development of these programs that really get us to a place we need to go. And we know through our research that, there are best practices and there are ways that, other states are achieving high recycling rates, and we should be paying attention to those and trying to adapt them and adopt them here. And Michigan's own state policy developed in 2007 said we want to work toward a 50% utilization goal. So utilization is another way to say recycling, but 50% is what they called for by 2015. We are nowhere close to 50%. So going back to our report, there's the 50% waste utilization goal. If we were to get to that 50% utilization goal, then that means that we would be diverting about 5 million tons of resources from the landfill annually. And if we could really do that, then that means we've captured the value of the raw material of that material, the raw material, to the tune of about $500 million a year. So there are real demonstrable benefits, but how do we get there and what does it cost? And that was the subject of our report. So these are the elements in our report that we identified are the things that we need to start moving toward our goal. Measurement and data collection, of course. We need to know where we are. We need to know what's in our waste stream. We need to know how effective the current recycling situation is. And as we input resources to the system, what kind of effect are they having? So we need that first. Education is something that is last on the budget and first thing to get cut, and people need to know what is expected of them. People need the information about what their recycling program offers. And more importantly, we're learning people need the motivation to do it. So there's that aspect of it. And then technical assistance is really helping communities and helping businesses make the leap from this waste paradigm to this recycling paradigm. You know, all that material, all this stuff has some value, and we need to capture that value. So the economic and market development piece of this is that, you know, if we're successful at capturing all this material and turning it into a commodity, well, then we have something to sell. We have something that will attract manufacturers and processors to Michigan, because now we don't have to truck that stuff across the country, or they don't have to pay the transportation fees. They can just absorb what's going on right here and manufacture and sell their products right here. So we want to attract them to Michigan. And then we need money for things like county solid waste planning, and that is really for every county in Michigan to have a reasonable plan and to deal with the end-of-life materials that are traditionally managed by the government. And so they need to have the tools and the resources available to them to make these plans. This county solid waste planning tool was developed back in the, I think, early 90s, 80s, when we were having kind of a landfill crisis, because counties needed to make sure that they had landfill capacity for their waste. Well, now we need to transform the purpose of this county planning to meaning kind of integrated materials management rather than waste management. So we need to make that leap, and it costs money. We need the state to take a leadership role. That costs money. That's state, you know, administration. And the most costly thing on this list is community services and infrastructures. Recycling is a local game. We need to provide services. We need every single person in here to think about recycling, to participate, you know, in it as intensively as they can, to really make things successful. And so that's the high ticket item here. And what we estimate the cost of all this is $76 million. So when we put all this together, if our programs cost $76 million annually, but the benefit is almost $500 million annually, well, then that's a 6.5-fold return on our investment. It's a no-brainer. And we saw this, and we started talking to anybody who would listen to us about this. We talked to Governor Snyder's aides, we talked to the State Department of Environmental Quality, we talked to stakeholders in this industry, and they agree that there's value and benefit here, and that we need to collectively do something, and that the key question is, how do we pay for it? Of course, it always is in politics. So just take a step back for just a minute before I move to the next kind of phase of this presentation, is that in this recycling industry's effort to just draw more attention to recycling and get people to do more, we're starting to see that it's really imperative to motivate people to recycle. There's really kind of a social science to behavior change. Have you seen the Crying Indian campaign back in the 70s? Litter, and he was paddling through the lake, the swamp, whatever you want to call it, and litter all over. I mean, I think it touched every one of us. And that is key motivation to get people to change their thoughts about litter. And it probably did a lot to get us to the bottle bill, actually. Well, we need to apply that same kind of thinking to recycling, because recycling has a lot more capacity to impact our waste stream than the bottle bill does. And so we developed a campaign called Recycle Michigan. We're beginning to unroll this campaign, and it really is trying to help all Michiganders see that they have a role to play, that it's their responsibility, that it's a fun thing to do. We've been educating our kids for 20 years, and those kids are growing up, and they expect to live in communities that provide a valuable public service, like recycling. So we help to, change the cultural tide with, with this campaign. And Keep America Beautiful actually is working with the Ad Council to also get footage of a campaign called I Want to Be Recycled across the nation. And this is some cute ads. They took a little bit different turn than the Crying Indian, but they took some cute ads where, you know, a pop bottle is rolling down the street, and this pop bottle just really wants to be something greater than what it is, and it rolls down and bumps up against a park bench, and it wants to be a park bench. Yes, that's perfect. Or a metal can wants to be a bike. Yes, that's what we're talking about. So that's our campaign. I hope you see it more and more. So going back to the funding option. So we provided in our report, here's some ways we could fund this. A landfill surcharge. So we all have to pay to put our stuff in the landfill. Well, we think you should pay more to put your stuff in the landfill. And that money, you know, go back to help pay for recycling programs. Well, you know, that was debated in the halls of the Capitol for like 10 years, and it never went anywhere. And you know, with what's happening there right now, who knows what will happen. But having a surcharge on landfill solid waste is an economic disincentive that is really valuable to changing behavior. Politically, I don't know how it will fly. You know, the governor could say, this is so important to me, let's put general fund money into that. But we're not going to hold our breath on that one. There's something called a sustainability fee idea floating out there. It used to be called the penny plan or a transaction fee, but it's really anywhere between a penny and a nickel, and it would be per retail transaction. So if you go to the store and buy a cart, whether it's a gallon of milk or a cart full of groceries, that one transaction, you would put 3 cents in a fund that would pay for, you know, the end-of-life management and all the packaging that's in that, you know, transaction. You know, again, politically, I don't think it's palatable for anybody at the Capitol right now to put more taxes or fees on people. So I want to spend a little time talking about product stewardship and deposit law amendments. So I don't know what you've heard about product stewardship, but it's increasing in its captivity of, I think, our imaginations, at least on a national level. Because as businesses begin to see that, you know, these resources could be scarce in our future. They're not, you know, our natural resources and our renewable resources aren't like abundant. We have to find ways to replant trees and to, you know, to replace what we're using. You know, they want to be good stewards too. And there's this battle, you know, for how much does a company do versus how much does the government do versus how much of our individual responsibilities there are. But we're clearly trying to define what roles producers have in the end of life responsibility for their products. So, in product steward, the theory is that we're really trying to reduce and minimize the impact, the negative impacts of our products. And everybody involved in the life cycle of that product has responsibility to reduce that. But producers have the most responsibility. They can affect the design of that product, whether it's recyclable or not, whether it's too much packaging, or whether it's, you know, they're using toxics. You know, they have the power in that situation. And they also need a feedback mechanism so that, you know, on the other end, if it's costing a government millions of dollars a year to manage that end product or the end of life of that product, then the manufacturer needs to hear about that, because it's not fair to externalize a cost and put it on governments. And in fact, you know, this whole movement is starting because governments have been traditionally responsible for garbage management, and it's with the complexity of, you know, products that are out there, with the toxicity of the products that are out there, governments just can't do it anymore, and we need help to do that. And in fact, you know, whether or not, how far this goes as far as making producers responsible, I don't know. It's still up for discussion and debate. But whatever happens, businesses need to be aware and responsible for their products in some way, shape, or form, or else nothing's going to change. So this is an important movement that I can guarantee you'll hear more about. So, fast forward, our work with this 2011 report, got to the right people. Governor Snyder, back in November of 2012, said, you know what, recycling is one of my priorities this year. It is important. There's benefit and value across the board. There's no reason we can't do this. And so the DEQ director, Dan Wyant, spent about 9 months or so visiting material recovery facilities and composting operations and dirty MRFs and all different kinds of facilities and operations and talking to all these people. And they came up with what they're calling a straw man proposal. Okay, so here, stakeholders, here's what we think might get us further down the road. Because they didn't want to, stakeholders didn't want to take our suggestions. You know, we didn't want to take other stakeholders' suggestions, so we put it all in their field, and this is what they spit back to us. So, yes, they agree, we need recycling measurement. Yes, they agree, we need education and technical assistance. Yes, we agree we need market and economic development. Great. We need access to recycling options, and these last three I'm going to spend a little more time talking about because these are where the change has to happen. But we need access to recycling options for all of our people. We need to find a long-term funding mechanism, and we're probably maybe going to have to make changes to our deposit law to make it all happen. So first of all, the recycling access piece, it really has to do with the governor's dashboard and the populations and the density of the populations and how we serve and serve the populations to make recycling convenient for everybody. So rather than taking our suggestion of spending $69 million to give money back to communities to help them ramp up systems, the DEQ said, well, why don't we just make all waste haulers in Michigan have to pick up recyclables too? That's great. We don't have to pay for that. We just have to put this policy in place. Okay, well, that sounds like a neat idea. And everybody's, you know, the Michigan Waste Industry Association's pretty on board with this. You know, the Township Association and the Municipal League are all thinking, well, you know, how is this going to affect our communities that are providing services? And so there's some glitches to be worked out, but, you know, this is a pretty clever policy way to get at it without having to pay for that big cost. So we're going in the right direction. A little input of information before I go on to the next part of this. The bottle bill. So we got a good bottle bill. It's one of the highest in the country because it's a 10-cent bottle bill. It started as a litter abatement adventure, and it really jump-started recycling programs. But you have retailers managing end-of-life material. They don't like it. They don't want it. They've been against it for years, and they work very hard, paid lots of lobbyists to thwart any efforts to expand that bottle bill. The bottle bill only represents about 2% of the waste stream. We want to get to 50% of the waste stream. Even if it's expanded, it's only 4% of the waste stream. But it's a valuable portion of the waste stream because we're talking about aluminum and we're talking about PET, you know, pop bottles. Those are very high value materials. And the recycling operations that I represent don't benefit from the sale of that material. That material goes through kind of a whole different stream and is managed by, you know, maybe one company in Michigan. So our recycling operations don't get the value of the aluminum and the PET and the curbside programs that help them offset the costs of curbside recycling. So they're starting to look at the bottle bill and say, well, gosh, it's just taking stuff away from my ability to provide good services. Why are we doing that? And so, we're starting to try to look at recycling more holistically. And what we're seeing is that there's really two different ways we manage material, and it may be more effective to find a more integrated way to manage our material that allows us to get to much, much more of it. So, the way this relates to the whole endeavor is that the money, the sheets it's called, but when you don't return a pop can, and it goes into your recycling bin or falls out of your car or whatever happens to it, and it doesn't go back through the system and you get your dime back, that money is put in a pot called the escheats. And that escheats, you know, I don't know, maybe 16 million a year on a good year. But 25% of that escheats goes back to retailers to help them offset the cost of managing the material, and 75% goes to brownfield redevelopment. And so they're looking at that pot of money as like, okay, you know, this pot of money is already there. We don't have to recreate it. We just have to reapportion it. But reapportioning it to recycling means that we have to open the bottle bill back up again. And because the bottle bill was put in place by a public referendum, it would require a 3/4 vote by the legislature to make anything happen. Which means that we need the support of our very strong lobbying efforts on from the opponents of the bottle, the retailers, the grocers, the soft drink association, anybody who has to deal with that and who doesn't want the bottle bill anymore. We have to find a way to work with them so that they can get what they want and we can get what we want and we can all work together. So the idea that the DEQ has come up with is redemption centers. So right now, all your pop cans and your beer cans and your whatever go back to the retail store. We are the only state in the union where it only goes back to the retail store. Other states have redemption centers, and those redemption centers sit apart from retail stores and collect that material. So what the redemption centers would allow retailers to invest in redemption centers outside of the store so that they don't have to deal with the pop cans and all that comes with them. And maybe we recyclers can make something bigger out of those redemption centers. Maybe we can turn them into more comprehensive drop-offs, and we can collect things like paint and mattresses and all this other stuff that we're having a hard time figuring out what to do with, or are nuisances on the road, or are part of illegal dumping. So it's an interesting idea. And ironically, the people at the table really are the solid waste and recycling industry and the proponents and the opponents of the bottle bill, because that's who's been most vocal in the legislature. And as this issue gets picked up in the media, they're turning it into a don't take our bottle bill away scenario. And we don't see it as that. We see it as we want to recycle this much, not just this much. And we need to look at the whole system of how we do that. And we need to figure that out. So, we need help to bring focus, back to recycling here in Michigan. We need help, and this particular campaign is that it's really about encouraging action where you live, work, and play. So, in every place that you work, do you have a recycling container so that you can recycle there? In the place you worship, do you have recycling containers so you can recycle there? At home, are you well served so that, the more and more advanced we get in the way we can manage these materials, do you have convenient access to them? Because that's where it's going to start. And, we need to inform and educate and put a lot of resources in it to move things forward. So that's the end of my presentation. I would be happy to take questions. Yes.
I have an old auntie.
Great.
It's a little bit personal, but it relates to access.
Yeah.
Us being church-oriented, we go to a church that's in Madison Heights. Royal Oak is part of Sacra.
Right. Okay.
But Madison Heights doesn't offer recycling. So we take our church's recycling, sneak it home, and put it in with Royal Oak's recycling. And I'm asking if you have a suggestion for ethical way to recycle at our church.
You probably have a dumpster out in the back of the church where, you pay a waste hauler to come and pick up that dumpster. I would suggest that anybody in here could look at whatever contract you have for your waste hauling and contact them and say, hey, you know, we see our contracts coming up, or we'd like to renegotiate our contract because we would like recycling added to that contract. You know, it's really simple, and I think that the marketplace is changing, and our waste haulers are beginning to see that not only can they provide a valuable service to you that keeps you as a loyal customer, but that, you know what, they don't have to pay to put that in a hole in the ground. They can pay to process it, and they would get revenue on the other side. So you have to have conversations instead of relying on kind of those similar old ways of doing things. We need to begin to demand these services from our public and our private service providers, really.
So that's a step we can take, is contact our waste provider.
Yes, most definitely. Or even your, you know, your municipal government. Or your township government, and say, you know, I would really like to recycle here. We would like to be a part of making something happen. They need to hear that it's a valued public service as well. Yeah.
I have two questions. Let me do my small one first. You were talking about the percent of waste that's recycled, and you did Michigan region in the U.S.
Yeah.
What were those three numbers?
Michigan is about 14.5, and that's just an educated guess. The Great Lakes states average about 30%, and nationally we average like 34%. There are some, you know, really stellar states that recycle, you know, above 70%, and I think it would be great if we could get to that. And getting to those high numbers is going to take food waste, you know, composting and recovery. You know, it's going to take a lot more than what we're able to do right now.
Thank you. So the second question builds on that. We're getting, so I'm in Ann Arbor, which is a real friendly place for this. And we're partnered with Ann Arbor Recycling to bump up the recycling that's happening at our parish, which is St. Francis of Assisi. But what's really interesting, it relates to this gentleman's question, is we're also getting a recycling program started at Gabriel Richard High School, which is Catholic High School in Ann Arbor. And that's really the first question. These guys don't have recycling pickup and waste management, which is their waste pickup. They're happy to do recycling, but because of a distance issue, it comes with a very big price tag, so that's not quite working. So we got something else that'll be a solution, and then we can start down the road, which is all great. Here's my question. Where's the economics right now for this MRF in Southfield? I'm going to ask the same question to Kirk out at Recycle Ann Arbor. Where are we in the business equation? Is the commodity stream generating the revenue to cover the costs of this process? Are we getting closer to that? Because ultimately, if this becomes economically viable, there's a business driver which will be required to take it to scale.
Right.
So where are we on that business equation?
Great question. What I tell people is that when you pay for waste services, you know, whether you have to pay directly with the waste hauler or you pay taxes through your municipality or it comes on your water bill or whatever, you're paying for a service to have something picked up at your curb and then taken away. You know, and so you still have to pay for the service of, you know, having something else picked up at your curb, but the value is that, you know, this recycling stream or this composting stream, because generally we're talking about 3 different streams of materials now, they now can be taken to different places. They don't cost you really, well, they do cost for processing, but many of the commodities, and especially if the prices are good, because the commodities market really operates like this, but that the overall cost is reduced because those commodities are sold on the other side. So while, you know, you're still paying for that cost of collection and transportation, the processing costs end up being offset by the sale of the commodities. You're saving on the cost of landfilling because you're not doing that, so that's a part of the equation. And in places where infrastructure is there and readily available, it's much more convenient and easy to do and economically viable. And the problem in Michigan is that we don't have a comprehensive, coherent, cohesive, solid infrastructure everywhere in the state. the southeast Michigan region is pretty well covered, but there's obviously problems. Oakland County is well served if you're under the two authorities, ROSOC and SACRA, but if you're not a part of those, it means you're in the less densely part of Oakland County that needs maybe a different kind of service. But it's a service that needs to be coordinated or at least overseen by government to make sure that it's offered at this point. Because you're right, the economics aren't completely there. But the way recycling has been growing has been by municipalities who have been taking initiative, Ann Arbor, for instance, Kent County, for instance, and by companies that see the value and can see far enough ahead that they want to be in control of those resources. And if they're in control of those resources and can maximize the production capacity of the investments that they put in place, then they will be successful and they will be able to provide their service for less and less cost. But we haven't gotten the mass there yet. That's what needs to happen. Sure, go ahead, and then you.
In Port Huron, Michigan, we have curbside recycling, and among the things they pick up is glass, but we've recently read in the paper that they have the glass isn't taken by anyone to reuse, so it's brought to the landfill. So I don't know if you can say anything about that.
Glass is a challenging material. This is another case where the bottle bill has an impact on the glass because the glass industry depends very much on the glass generated from our bottle bill because it's dealt with separately, which means it's a very clean stream of material. You can keep the colors separate, which is valuable. And with the advent of single stream recycling, the glass becomes a contaminant because it breaks in the process and gets into the paper and becomes problematic. And so as we move forward in these systems, glass is going to be the thing that we have to grapple with. Do we maintain, a bottle bill system and really a whole separate processing for glass because of its unique properties? It's very, very heavy, and to transport it to market, costly when the market is just outside of Michigan. And so glass is a challenge, and finding different ways to use it, like using it in concrete and in road bed and things like that. So more alternative ways of managing and dealing with glass are going to happen with this single stream recycling and other way of dealing with it.
So what's the logic of picking it up?
Gosh, that's a good question. I think it's just a high volume that just got started, and I think a lot of programs have tried to say, no, I don't want to pick up your glass because it messes with our system, and people are, no, wait, then what am I going to do with this glass? So it's really kind of probably a public, more public issue. And trying to help people see these are complex issues, and trying to communicate and educate about glass is much farther down the totem pole than is just trying to get them to recycle. Because with single stream, we just want them to get the stuff into the bin. We'll take care of sorting it out, but we need to get stuff into the bin. So the issue with glass is really we're trying to take care of that at the end of the process then, with new technology and sorting mechanisms and things that help to fall, let these glass cullet and shards fall through the system so they don't contaminate. We need to develop technology better to manage that in the system. So you had a question and you have a question.
I had a brief comment followed by a question.
Okay.
But the comment was just to say that I've personally seen the changes you're talking about in industry. I live in a very small suburb right outside of Kalamazoo, and we just switched to a different waste carrier. And it's a very small private company, but what they offered was for a cheaper rate than we had for our old waste pickup. We have 3 identical dumpsters. So we have trash pickup, green waste pickup, and recycling pickup, all same size, which is fabulous.
Yeah.
But the question I had was regarding the reclamation center idea.
Yeah.
How is that progressing politically? I mean, is that something that we could conceivably see in the near future?
That's where the talk is kind of in the inside circles right now, is what are the redemption centers going to look like, who's going to pay for them, how much are we going to try to operate them. I think there's a fear that, many of the kind of rural drop-off programs that are out there, they're a magnet for illegal dumping. And so, we have to deal, like, are we talking that, or are we talking just about, the Tamra machines that we put just the stuff in, just those being covered and outside? What really are we talking about? And so that's where the nexus of the conversation is. And every day there's something new about that. I just learned yesterday the fact that Michigan is the only state in the country that doesn't have a redemption center. So, or doesn't have this redemption center model, and it's something worth exploring, because I bet there are other states out there that have really gotten a handle on how to best manage those and how to make them work for us. Good stuff. Go ahead, and then you.
So it's possibly like if the state is waiting for some kind of private or some innovative person to come up with some model for a redemption center, and then they'll say, oh, okay, we'll follow behind with some funding. Is that what they?
Well, who knows what it could happen at this point, but I do think the conversation is shifting to, okay, so we have to make the retailers happy so that we get their political, okay to use this money. And they want the bottles out of the stores. So redemption centers are the option that we're looking at. How do we make them work in a way that works for recyclers, that works for the grocery stores, that works for the general public? So conceivably, very much yes. If someone's got some good ideas, now would be the time to come with them. Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah, we have a problem with styrofoam. We can't put it in a recycle bin.
Yeah.
So we collect it, we try not to use it, but we go places where they have
Right.
styrofoam cups. We collect them, take them to the recycle center.
Right.
And also we pick up from a small shelter outside town, which doesn't have recycling, have to pay somebody, so we pick that up. And when we go there to the recycle center, there are bins. A bin for white office paper, a bin for colored office paper and envelopes, a bin for newspapers, a bin for that.
Right.
And I was there yesterday, and somebody working there said they get 3 times as much money for the white office paper as they do for the colored office paper and envelopes. So,
True.
well, if it goes in the general thing, then.
Yeah. Right. And so that, there's still a discussion at the industry level as to whether really single stream is the way to go. A lot of people are talking about dual stream, keeping your containers separate from your fibers. But what I think is people are moving towards is the fact that we just want to get these materials. We just want to be able to process them, and what we need to get better at is separating and sorting them out, making it easy for you to put something in your recycling bin and not in your waste bin.
Styrofoam just gets everything.
Well, yeah, you're exactly, because it breaks down into little bitty pellets, and it's just contaminant, right? And a funny story, at this raw sock facility right up the road, they had a fire last year, maybe a couple years ago, and they had a trailer full of styrofoam, and when they opened up the trailer, it was like, where is the styrofoam? It was literally in a brick about that big in the middle of the trailer, because it's air. And so to recycle styrofoam means that you're trucking air across county lines, and it's not economically feasible to do such a thing. 2 minutes, so maybe one more question, if there is any. Otherwise, go to the bathroom. Well, thank you for your attention. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.